Welcome everyone who is coming in to the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. Thank you so much for being here today. We are so excited to fly with Bob Gurr. We'll get started shortly. We'll give time for people to get on, so we'll get started in about 2 minutes. Thank you everyone for joining us for this Spirit of the Time with Disney legend Bob Gurr. We will get started in just a moment. Thank you guys so much for being here on this beautiful Friday. Again, thank you everyone who's just joining us for the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast with Bob Gurr. We'll get started in just a few seconds.
Station she sees after.
Welcome everyone to the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. I'm Becky Kiefer, Studio Director. Here inside the Zeitgeist Creative Studio, imagination rules and time is always of the essence. This is where immersion artists Ryan Harmon, Joe Cicero, and the world's top experienced designers study the past and spend the present envisioning the future of location-based entertainment, or what we like to call UXIRL, user experiences in real life. The Spirit of the Time Zoomcast offers a sneak peek behind the themes. Each month, we move you without a ride system, inviting one incredibly talented and influential colleague aboard our time machine. And we set the controls for milestone moments in that person's career, an attempt to unravel the mystery of what makes a guest experience timely yet timeless. And because we're live, you can type questions into the chat box and our passenger will answer them after the hour-long journey if we have time today. Climbing aboard our time machine is the 93-year-old designer of nearly every one of Disneyland's ride vehicles. Author, Disney legend, and TEA Lifetime Achievement Award recipient, Bob Gurr. If you've ever experienced the Disneyland Monorail, Submarine Voyage, Matterhorn Bobsleds, Haunted Mansion, Autopia, or Main Street Vehicles, or saw Universal's original King Kong Encounter, the pirate ship battle at Treasure Island in Las Vegas, or the UFO in the 1984 LA Summer Olympics, then you have experienced Bob's visionary design and engineering work. It's now my pleasure to introduce our time machine pilots, Zeitgeist President and Chief Creative Officer, Ryan Harmon, and Senior Vice President and Chief Art Director, Joe Lancicero, along with the last living Imagineer to have worked hand in hand with Walt Disney himself, Bob Gurr.
We are back, Joseph.
Am I here? Am
Wow.
I?
Wow. We just came back from July 17th, 1955, which is going to be 70 years in just 3 weeks. And Bob, we saw you driving right down Main Street in one of your Autopia vehicles with a little child, I think, with you, and a little surprise on the side of the road. Tell us about that.
Well, my boss, Roger Brookley Sr., was kind of a cryptic person, only used minimum words. He showed me the picture and he said, Robert, the horses left their opinion of your car design. Oh, and I never lived it down, and I'm horrified that somebody gave you that photograph, and it's the first one you pull up here.
So who's the lucky kid?
It is an omen of my life not being what I thought it was, but that was fairly early on an opinion.
Okay. So it's a pleasure to have you, Bob. We are all, huge fans of you and all of the work you've done. And Joe, did you ever get a chance to work with Bob?
No, but Bob probably doesn't remember it, but I think it was at a fantasy fan club gathering. I was being honored that day, and Bob, you were invited. And Dick Nunes was also being honored that day. And I was so impressed because you walked in and they already had a martini poured for you, waiting for you on the table. I said, this is the guy who knows how to operate.
Yes. It's in his rider, I think. No black M&Ms and martini. Must be there, right?
But awesome. Bob, looking at that picture and that day and all that followed afterwards, did you guys have any idea that you were changing the world? I mean, I know hindsight's always 20/20, and you look back on these things, and you now have all this time to think about it. But at that moment, I mean, Walt was reinventing the entertainment world, really, and changing how everybody was going to experience, outdoor entertainment from that day forward. Did you guys have a sense of what you were doing?
Well, you got to realize, yes, I'm up in Burbank drawing stuff, and then I'm gradually slipping into having to drive all the way to Anaheim with a freeway under construction, which meant a gravel road, my Cadillac convertible with no air conditioning, and spend the entire day, go home, sleep, wake up, go right back down there. The only thought I had was, oh my God, will we ever open this thing in time? And then the day before the real opening was, hey, it might open. And it was kind of a shock. And then within a week, we found out everything is breaking really fast. And we're taking stuff apart and sending it back to the studio. So that set the stage all the way to about September 55 was, oh my God, none of this stuff is working, but we are fixing things one at a time. But I never thought beyond the fact that I wonder if this will get all the way to Christmas before it goes bankrupt.
Wow.
It wasn't until just about Christmas time that we suddenly saw all these people came back. We closed, Mondays and Tuesdays to try to have extra time to fix everything. It was broken. But somehow at Christmas time, I think everybody decided that hadn't gone and said, well, we better go. And Walt had put Christmas lights on top of all the buildings, which in January he says, oh, just take the colored bulbs out and leave the white ones and we'll call it rim lighting. So that was a first news theme. Oh. I think partway into 56, we could see that Walt wants to build this, he wants to add that. And I thought, oh my gosh, this thing might work. We're going to be busy to get ready for the summer 56. And then during the part of that summer, Walt popped into my office one day, which he comes in about, once a week at least. And he just casually mentioned, he says, "Oh, Bob, this is the first year we didn't go bankrupt." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "We make movies and then we get the money and then we spend the money and then we have no income until the next movie comes out. But," he says, "now with the park," he says, "we're not going bankrupt anymore."
No.
I didn't realize how nip and tuck it was in 1954, 5, and 6.
Wow.
So at no time did I ever have an inkling that this will be an adorable thing and it might expand and it might be famous someday. You see, what happened is by 1982, the fan clubs were coming around and everybody said, "Oh, Bob, did you ever think you were contributing to anything that would last this long?" And I said, "No."
Well, let's go back a little bit because we need to set the time machine. We can start. You were born October 25th, 1931, and you lived right by Walt Disney in Los Feliz. Is that true? Like 2 blocks?
Yes, the depression was getting deeper. My father had lost his job, and he had to move in. We moved in with my grandmother 2 blocks down from the Woking Way house. I didn't know that till later.
Wow.
But for my poor father, he had to move in with his mother-in-law, so
Oh.
that was not so good. But yes, it was 2 blocks down the street from in Los Feliz district. Yes.
Wow. And then you moved to Glendale in like 34. And tell us why were you getting in trouble a lot in school? You're at Thomas Jefferson School in kindergarten and you're already getting in trouble. What were you doing?
Well, in the first year or two, I think I got a hint about the kind of rascally brat I'm going to be. I turned out to, in later years, wound up being expelled from 3 schools, sent to military academy as incorrigible. I got fired from 2 companies, one of which was the Walt Disney Company fired me
Wow.
just because of my sort of, some people say he's irascible or he's terrible, but I always do what I want to do. And it's not necessarily what an employer wants to do. And when Disney fired me, it was, all right, I'll create my own company and hire myself. Therefore, I can't get fired anymore. And that's
Right.
what I did. But
Wow.
into kindergarten, I got in a fight with a kid. And the first day I got introduced to Mr. Johnson, the school principal. And the first thing I learned was only deal with upper management.
That's so good.
But Bob, I got the sense, doing research on you and what I know of others who worked with Walt, that Walt really, I think he embraced all the crazy characters that he had and understood that, it was that those kinds of personalities that made great art and made great stuff. And it didn't seem like he really cared so much about what you did off hours, that, if you delivered great work, Walt was happy. And unfortunately, I feel like, there's not a lot of people like that around these days.
Yeah, everyone's scared.
No, Walt Disney understood, particularly in the 30s, animators were gag men. You'd do a bunch of gags and then you'd string it together and see if it would make a cartoon out of it. It might last 15 minutes. So the type of thinkers, these guys are, they're just characters. They tease people. There's all kinds of gags going on. And there's all kinds of other things in their lives we don't dare talk about. Walt had the ability to overlook that completely.
Wow.
In fact, there was one story where at the Hyperion Studio, one of the guys quit and he got so mad he went across the street to have a liquid lunch, and Walt followed him over to this saloon and spent a long time telling the guy, "You need to stay because you are going to do something good for me." And that's what he would do when he saw a talent. He'd try to retain him. And the opposite of that is never criticize an artist, even if they've done something dumb and it cost you a lot of money.
Yeah. Wow. So in 1943, you got expelled from sixth grade. You went to seventh grade in North Hollywood, and you were raising goats, selling milk, and you had four paper routes. Is this
Yeah,
your
for paper
entrepreneurial?
routes.
Where were you raising goats?
Well, I got the goats because I had two geese, which I traded to the principal of the military academy because he wanted to. He couldn't cook the goats, but he could cook the geese if I swapped the geese for the goats. So I wound up in the goat business, and I found out goat's milk you can sell it for four times the price of cow's milk because it has no bacteria, and doctors actually specify it for
Oh,
certain diseases. So I glommed on to making a lot of money with. I always had at least two milking goats, and usually had maybe two more goats. So I was a goat farmer for about 4 years. But the paper routes were very important. My father had died in 43,
mm,
left us literally penniless, but we had a half acre of fruit trees. So I sold fruit out in a little stand I put in front of the house.
wow.
But the paper I kind of liked because I wanted a bicycle, and I was told if you want a bicycle, you better get a paper route. And I soon wound up with four paper routes. And I could buy war bonds for $18.50. And at the end of the war, I could sell them for $25.
Oh,
So besides earning enough money that we didn't all starve to death in the summer of 43,
yeah.
I actually put money away, and I got used to not only having fun with airplanes, running around, getting in trouble, but I was making money. I was in charge of things. Yes.
So was it in 47 when you went into auto shop and metal shop that you first discovered your love of machines and vehicles?
Well, here's a very sad thing. Today, schools have no time, no budget for
Right,
shop classes, let's say the things that aren't related to a 4 year college.
right.
Luckily, I had right off the bat, seventh grade, I had wood shop, metal shop. By the time I got to high school, I add in a much a higher detailed metal shop and auto shop. Can you imagine? You got an old car you're working on, and you bring it in the shop, and you get school credit for working on your car in class. Oh, the kids today, they have no idea how much fun and education we actually
Yeah,
got in those days.
right. Is
So
that where
that,
you?
that launched me very well as I like to draw stuff, but I like to build stuff, but I could repair stuff. So by the time I leave Art Center, I mean, leave high school to go to Art Center,
Yeah.
I know a lot more about what constitutes an automobile, all its parts, processes, the whole thing, because I learned how to, fix them, race them, do all kinds of stuff.
Wow. So
Did you have a parallel path where you were you loved drawing and you loved, mechanics and engineering? I mean, did one involve you more than the other? I mean, it seemed, in some ways, one's more right brain and one's a little more left brain, and you know, combining the two, obviously, you were able to do that.
Well, in hindsight, I didn't see the value for a great number of years. That the fact that I was actually better off not going to a 4 year conventional college
hmm,
because a 4 year college, if unless you're careful, you will be taught things to memorize for a good grade, but you never learn to do a thing.
wow,
All
that's
you
so
did was
true.
become a memorizing agent.
Yeah.
In my case, I was fiddling and fooling around with stuff from the get go. And so I had a broader picture of industry as a whole, automobiles in specific, which meant that I never suffered a class that taught me the things that you can't do.
Ah,
Luckily, a lot of people working for Walt were the same way, in that Walt would ask us to do stuff. He'd never done it, and we'd never done it. So we did it. And I think the education that I didn't get formally beyond drawing cars at Art Center was the biggest value that I got advantage over other kids that came later.
wow. So you graduated North Hollywood High, you went to Art Center. Was it in Pasadena at the time?
No, it was on Third Street. there was a great big home that was left over from the 30s that was taken over by the U.S. Army. It was a U.S. Army headquarters.
Wow.
And Tink Adams had the school way downtown, and he got a hold of that building when the Army moved out. So they were just starting to take students that weren't veterans. See, veterans' money, the GI Bill was paying an expensive school, Art Center, for the students.
Right.
And the year that I got there, they were just running out of veterans. And I had a bad portfolio, and I was told your portfolio is not very good. We only take 21-year-olds. How old are you? Well, I'm 17. And then the lady said, well, who's going to pay for this? And my grandmother held onto her purse and said, I am. Carla Martel, the registrar, she saw, oh. And then I found out a week later, I was the first person under 21 let into Art Center because they were just starting to starve for government money, and they would take private money.
Right. Wow.
Oh.
and you graduated in just 3 years, right? You got out of there quickly. You didn't get expelled from this one?
No. Oh, I almost was. Yeah, that's another story. I insulted a teacher when I didn't turn in the assignment, and he says, well, why didn't you? I says, your class is irrelevant, sir, and I didn't do my work. And the guy, I thought the guy was going to kill me. Yeah, you know, I've insulted teachers many times, and then I learned that's like a knife going right through their back because they live for teaching students something worthwhile.
Right.
And unfortunately, I have an opinion. If it's not worthwhile, I'm not going to spend any time on it. Yeah, it's simple. But that started in first day in kindergarten. So it's right. Yeah.
So 1952, you graduate Art Center early, and you're hired by General Motors. Tell us about that.
Well, the way the Art Center worked, the auto industry worked in those days. We had three companies, Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, and those guys, the representatives, would come out to the schools and see, which were the students that they might like to hire. And in my case, General Motors showed up before Ford and Chrysler.
Oh.
And so I was the one who was picked. Of course, halfway school, I did qualify for a General Motors scholarship. So grandmother didn't have to pay anymore.
Wow.
The second half.
Yeah.
And then they had me go to Detroit about a month before the graduation. So I never graduated. I was sent to Detroit, but there was a strange turn of things with these competitive car companies. Ford Motor Company, an agent with them who was an ex-General Motors guy, talked to the school job placement officer and took me away the day before I was supposed to go to GM.
Whoa.
And boy, did that start a hornet's nest. Here I'm 20 years old with a bow tie coming out of California, and I went up to the Ford Motor Company, which meant my dream job. General Motors, my bridge got burnt without me knowing what they were doing.
Wow.
I only lasted a year and a half because within 2 weeks, at the Ford Motor Company in the advanced studio, I took a long look into the future and said, car design is going to be a dead end the way it's done today. Wow. I'm drawing hubcaps. I'm drawing hood ornaments. I'm not designing a thing. So a year and a day went by, and then I said, that's it. I'm leaving. I came back to California and just goofed off with little jobs for about a year and a half. No career in mind, no dream of where I'm going to go. I drew some pictures for some consultants and then went to the beach.
How did Walt come knocking at your door? How did you go knocking on his door?
Well, I got a phone call from the Disney studio. I'd never given a thought to anything Disney. And said, go to the studio and meet Mr. Irvine in 20 minutes. And there was Mr. Irvine at the front gate of the studio waiting for me. And I put two and two together about a couple of days later. Oh my gosh, he's the guy that's running the whole Disneyland and he's waiting for me. Ooh, that was an important phone call, which I found out much later, the source of the phone call. But Disney had a couple of car guys and I was in a car club with them. All car guys, we all know one another. So Ward Kimball And another fella turned me into Walt when Walt said, "I'm looking for somebody to do a body on a little car." The guy that built the chassis can't do a body. Oh, I could do that. And I hung around for 27 years.
So what, that was your first role? Was that a private job just helping Walt, or was that for Autopia?
Yeah, no, I was hired to do the Autopia body, but while
Okay.
doing the Autopia body, he threw more things at me before the opening day at Disneyland. And I could see that, oh my gosh, I'm designing way more stuff now than I could have ever done in a lifetime at Detroit in the car industry. But the joke was, I got to draw lots of cars, old cars, new cars. I got to draw monorails, WED PeopleMover. I got to design the mechanical body of a president of the United States.
Wow.
Where would you get a job like that if you were trained for it?
Yeah. Wow.
So,
So at first, were
so
you at the studio?
that-
Sorry, Joe. Go ahead.
no. So that's interesting what you said. You know, there was no formal training for this. I mean, you don't train to draw, you know, the body of Lincoln or to come up with designs like this. So you have all this training from Detroit. I mean, so how do you then come into this new arena and start creating all these never before done ride vehicles and animatronics and things?
Well, I tell you again, it's all in hindsight. You look back at stuff. How did we do all of that stuff? It's fairly simple. Walt was the most curious guy I ever met. You didn't have to tell him something the second time. I would be with him at companies looking at new advanced things like lasers and stuff. He immediately understood it and saw what we could do with it. I mean, that's super curiosity. The other thing, he seemed to only ask people to come to work for him that were just as curious as he was. Because the simplest thing, he could ask somebody to do something and they'd figure it out and they'd do it. An extreme thing that happened in 1958, he found a monorail company he wanted to work with. And then he shows me the pictures of the German trains. And he says, "Well, Bobby, they're not very good looking. I want you to get started on ours right away." And he walked out of the room. No production notes, no suggestions, nothing. He would do that to people right and left, and we survived it. But I think the reason for that is going back to the fact I was not formally educated in, let's say, mechanical engineering. I certainly never heard of a class called Theme Park Design 101, neither had Walt or anybody else.
Right.
And the fact that I had hands-on as a little kid fiddling and fooling with stuff physically with my own hands, but I have a pencil. I love to draw stuff that doesn't exist. I mean, all those things were just characteristics that you just picked up and evolved. So at no time was I ever terrified to take on anybody's job, even after I left Disney. I did 100 jobs for Walt, 150 for everybody else. Wow. And not one job repeated. This is ridiculous. Somebody says, "Well, Bob, what do you do?" Well, I have no idea because I never did anything over. I never got good at anything. Everything was different. So that answers your question. You can do a Lincoln body. I can sink a ship, do flying saucers, and Autopia car bodies. Because you love to do it.
Yeah.
How much iteration was there, like in that initial design for the monorail, which, by the way, your design is the design of the monorail. In fact, I cried a tear when they redesigned them because we always talk about timely and timeless, timeless designs. Your design, that original design, is really timeless, and I think that's a testament to, the purity of a design, something that lasts, that stands the test of time. But how many drawings did you have to do to get to that first design?
One.
Wow.
All right, let me explain. Contrary to today, where you have numerous people highly organized in a matrix in a large company to do a fairly large project, everybody's everybody's involved and everybody interferes.
Yeah.
The fact, go back to what Walt said, he said, Bobby, get started on ours right away. I have the pencil and I have the piece of paper, and I see what needs to be done and start getting into it, matter with a matter of a few hours. And within about 2 days, I came up with that design, and I made that one sketch, which, I think things called Monorail crossing, the tube trains crossing.
Yeah. Yeah.
John Hench put the paint on my drawing, but that was one drawing, and I did it in my home in about 10 minutes. Couldn't wait to get back in the office and make a big drawing of the same idea.
Yeah.
If you look at that train and you look at it, it's an industrial apparatus. It has a visual purity because it's geometric. All those shapes are simple geometric forms and transitions. If a designer is let loose and they can think and they can observe and they're curious and they've got a background of being curious about stuff, you know an awful lot about a lot of things. So you immediately know the do's and the don'ts, and you are free to go straight to the most pure thing that you can think of at that moment, and don't let anybody stop you. That, every time I've seen a designer do something, the things that really work are done in that kind of a manner. It's very unconventional, but it happens a lot with some people. And that's why I was just trying to get it done so we could build it. And now I look at it today and I says, my God, that thing is simple and sleek and right to the point. And that's a 1958 thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing.
Still looks fresh today.
Yeah.
That's what I loved about your designs. The fact that they felt like they were moving when they were still. That monorail had this sense of movement to it. Your original Autopia cars had this sense of movement to them. And I guess, so much of, what Walt was about animation. And I think about great designs, it's something that has life to it. Your designs, even the Doom Buggies in their own special way, there's an internal life to them. They move, they feel alive. And I think, like I said, I think it goes back to Walt and animation and movement. And boy, you sure captured that in everything you did.
Yeah, see, it's a purity of a Mickey Mouse. It took a couple of years to get Mickey Mouse where he was really a nice, fluid character that's so easy to understand. It's the purity of any kind of a design, whether it's animation, airplanes, or monorails, or whatever. If it's more on the purity side of thinking, then it has a tendency to endure, but it also is simpler to build and simpler to design, because if you are a designer, but you have a sense of manufacturing realities, I was in a lucky spot, because as I drew that monorail, every sketch, every line I put, can I build this? Can I build this shape? Can I build that? Well, I knew enough about race cars that I hung around race car people all the time. So the idea of all those shapes, we make it out of aluminum on a wooden pattern. We do it down a California metal shaping. There's next guy's building a fender for a Duesenberg, another guy's building an Indy car, and I'm doing a monorail. It's all the same techniques and the same materials in the same little shops.
Wow.
Now, see, if you design stuff and say, I got a pretty design that's on a computer, but it's not my responsibility to engineer it and get it to work. That's the wrong way. You want to have designers that either do it by themselves or have 2 or 3 people really close. If I draw a line, a machinist guy is going to look and says, Bob, you better think about this again. And that's the big difference. If a designer has the reality guidance of knowing where you're going, why you're going, all the stuff you don't want to do, even though you think it's cool. No, it's got to work, and it's got to last, and it's got to make people happy.
Yeah. Let's talk for a bit about the submarines. That was a big undertaking. It's really the only ride like that in the world to put people under the water at that time. What were the challenges of creating a submarine ride?
Okay, first off, I hate the word challenge because I never saw a challenge.
Okay, sorry.
If there was a challenge, I always have 4 or 5 ways to do something. I take the one that I think will work first, just in case it doesn't work. I got 1 or 2 more to go.
Okay.
So there's basically no challenge. What the company wanted to do, they wanted the monorail, the submarine to sink about 3 feet.
Right.
So they had me engineering how to, raise and lower the roller, just some air pressure changes. That's about all it was. And then somebody at the studio, when we were testing a tank for effects, they said, "Oh, just have some bubbles go up in front of the portholes so people think you're sinking." We never found out who did that. Oh, it saved us a fortune. So then I just made the design. If you go back to 1956, we just come out of the geophysical year, and we had a submarine that popped up through the ice up on the North Pole, and it was a good-looking, simple submarine. It was a pure thing, not like the World War II subs with all the junk hanging off of them. This was a good looking one. So I simplified that and made a simple conning tower, a couple of big windows, a real simple shape, a little tail fin on it. And I only made one drawing. No,
That's
not this one. This was the one for
That's
Walt
a Disney World.
Oh, yeah, that's the one with, that's the one highly stylized. No, one drawing, and we made a half mock-up to make sure the window spacing, how the spiral staircase will work, did all that. And Joe Fowler, our admiral, that was running the park in those days, went down to Todd Shipyards and said, "Build it. Here's Gurr's sketch. Build it."
Wow.
And that was a design that went really fast because it was just like, no, what, about a week's worth of work and I'm done. Went off and worked and everything else.
Wow.
I was just going to ask the question, and you kind of answered. How is it that you were able to get this stuff done so quickly?
Yeah.
I know my time in Imaginary, everything was like
aircraft. Let's back up to the monorail, because that's a pretty good example because it's a large project. Going back a little, what I said, when I draw a mechanical shape, it's going to be made out of metal.
Right.
Okay, the fact that I understood some of the limits of metal shaping, but I also understood how the metal shaping is really done. Both, curved flat pieces, compound curves, all of that. You immediately are designing with your sketches, and then the production drawings you're working on. These things are buildable because you look at a shop that's going to, bend metal and weld frames and do all that kind of stuff. To those fellows in the shop, they want to see something that they can build. They don't want to be handed a dreamy looking picture that simply said, "Oh, if you can dream it, you can build it. Here, I dreamed it, you try to build it." No, you don't do it that way. What you do is draw it so it's buildable to begin with, but make it as bitchin' looking as you can do it.
Yeah.
That way, then, when you're in the shop, see, I like to work with a shop all the time. And I wind up with being the test driver for the monorail. All this stuff it's all rolled in one, so to speak. But what that means is you don't, as a designer, create your own difficulties by your lack of good design and good production sense. That's the clue. And I did that with everything because I didn't see any point of making something hard to do just to show off that I'm a licensed engineer and I can get away with it. I'm not a licensed engineer, so I don't have a claim to be able to, write technical papers and make stuff that's sophisticated. Sophisticated means, whoa, going to be expensive. Don't ever use sophisticated. Go back to that simplicity every time.
That's great advice.
And see, simple stuff, you can build it much faster because there's no arguing, no revisions, none of the thing of doing stuff over. A lot of things today, we have to do it over because it doesn't work, but it was good looking to begin with.
Yeah.
And like we said earlier, I think those simpler designs withstand the test of time. The monorail bobsleds still look as fresh, today as when you drew it and opened it in the original one.
Matterhorn.
Which is it true that you took the first ride on the bobsleds?
Yeah. Tell us about working with Arrow on the first steel coast.
That was another very sudden quick job that Walt threw at me. I was doing 5 jobs for 1959, all of them just almost all together at one time. We got the track, enough of it built, but we didn't have all the track finished. once we get outside the vertical steel columns of the main building proper. So when the track came to an end, we had hay bales there, and then we tested it with sandbags. And I was down there one day with my boss, Roger Brody Sr., and my little 6-year-old boy. And Brody says, "Robert, you designed it, you write it." Okay. I knew it was working. No problem at all. So I jumped in and wrote it, and then we came down, and the car stopped, and then the guys all joked, and they said, "Oh, Bob, when you were going up there," they said, "we got it, Gurr, right where we want to pull the hay bales away." Well, you see me go off the end of the track. No, it did. It stopped before we got to the hay bales.
Yeah.
So, if you do stuff and you're highly involved in it and you're plodding along, making sure everything works at every single stage, you're not going to arrive near an end stage and find a big surprise that the whole thing doesn't work. You never do that. A roller coaster is a dangerous thing to do because there's a thing called a neutral slope. You can dip down and come back up, but your dip down and come back up can't go above a certain line. That's a slope called neutral slope. And it has to be guessed first because you're going to design the whole thing to fit that slope. If it's too steep, it goes too fast. If it's too shallow, it won't work. Aero Development was the people who are going to build it, and to make sure that their first roller coaster of a pipe type track was going to work, they invented the booster brake. If you remember, those little tiny, looked like tires, car tires, rolling, like the crest of some of the hills.
Yeah.
That will grab your car and speed it up if it's slow, and if it's going too fast, it'll grab it and slow it down. It's a simple little thing where you have a flat piece on the bottom of the car and the tire rubs it. And it can either rub it by speeding it up or slowing it slightly. So that was an insurance policy that Aero Development came up with their invention to do that.
Wow. That's amazing.
So simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And then in 69, you invented the OmniMover. Is this true? Or was there something similar like that? Or that was 64, sorry, for the New York World's Fair.
Come on, the New York World's Fair. Well, you got to remember, by 1964, Disney had a lot of experience with attractions and theme park design, a lot of stuff that we've done. And now we could sort of take a breather and look at the future and say, how can we make stuff better? And we had a issue that we had to look at on the attraction. The park always wants the highest theoretical hourly throughput.
Right.
And you try to do everything and it'll do that, but at the same time, don't screw up storytelling to do that.
Right.
And I was very familiar with all the attractions that I looked at the World's Fair, and I saw some principles that I really liked and I thought was pretty good. And I was sitting there talking to John Hinch in his office. And I says, John, we could have a track, and then we put a chassis on the track, and then we put a body on that, and it just goes around. And all you see is the back of the car in front of you for a high capacity train, let's say.
Right.
What if we had the art directors be able to turn the body, which means the viewpoint of the guest can go wherever the art director would like to do it. Turn right, turn left, go up, down, like that. And he had a candied apple on his desk, and I picked it up and I twirled it. And I said, just like that. See, the track, the chassis, we just put the body and the people in it, and we just twirl that around or tip it or whatever. And then the art director, we take a few seconds out of the segue turn. You can make a turn from one scene to the next. You want to take the segue out to maximize the scene length in seconds. So that configuration, a very simple idea to do that, meant that we could have a real high theoretical hourly capacity and make more seconds that the guest sees an attraction that's a big dimensional type of attraction. That general principle has been used by a lot of people just because it's a simple basic principle. But unfortunately, the name OmniMover got stuck because I was an airplane pilot at the same time, and there's a thing called an omni range, all being all directions.
Right.
But I said, we're moving people, it's omni, an omni mover. Well, the name just got stuck in a crazy discussion. The name never went away; it got locked into. So You know,
Wow.
it's like a record player got called a Victrola. Well, name stuck.
Right. Interesting. So did you design the Doom buggy specifically to be, is it black because it's Haunted Mansion, or is it black so it kind of goes away and your focus is on the show?
I'm trying to educate people wherever I go that the voyage through inner space
Oh, right.
was the first
Sorry.
and the cars were blue.
Right, right.
And the reason for the shape was due to the nature of the story. We're going to shrink ourselves down into an atom and go down and look at a nucleus. And the narration was going to be sort of sheltering and kind of cozy like. And I thought, ooh, we should now make the effort to put speakers, like stereo speakers, behind your ears. And I thought, oh, I could make a body come around and it's going to make you a little bit more closeted in there and sheltered from the fact that you're going to shrink and turn down into the size of an atom. This will be cozier. And the whole design just fell into place as fast as you could draw it. Just simple as that. And of course, a little clamshell and a handlebar. That's all it took. Very simple.
Wow.
And then, of course, the people working on Haunted Mansion was always going to be a walkthrough, which you can never space the timing and get the hourly capacity. And we had a test track set up at 1401 in Glendale, and they came over and they looked and, oh my God, the thing for the Monsanto Voyage to Inner Space, let's take it. And they redesigned the whole show that would solve their problem. Right. And of course, we use that at about 10 attractions around the world now. Same basic machine.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. So after 27 years, you get fired from WED Enterprises. Is that when you decided, screw that, I'm going to start my own company? And you
No, I didn't decide. The decision was made. They fired me. It's very simple. Yeah.
Right.
Well, the times were changing. The company had matured and was over-organizing itself, and it was getting slower and very expensive. And since they found out I wasn't a licensed engineer 2 years before, they said, you are not allowed to design anything anymore, but you can be a clerk for the drafting room with the fellows designing Epcot. What? So I was ready to leave. It was okay. And I accidentally insulted the chief engineer of the company. I hurt the guy's feelings, and he fired me. But they give you 14 days to write your resigning letter, so that way they don't fire you. Day 13, I was the president of Gurr Design Incorporated, and had hired myself. And I took off for the next 22 years designing stuff for everybody that anybody would call and said, hey, Gurr, we got a crazy thing. You want it? I'd take a look, and if the team that we're going to do was okay, I said, sure, I'll take it.
Wow.
Flying saucers. First one I did was a 30-foot tall gorilla for an arch enemy, Universal Studios.
Right. Wow.
Oh, that was so cool. The bigger a machine gets, the easier it is. There's more relative space inside because you don't scale things up literally. The bigger something gets, you keep rethinking how the structure should be. And that gives you all kinds of new opportunities. The inside of that gorilla was hollow. There wasn't much in it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's looking at sizing is very difficult to do because most people think, oh, just blow it up on the computer. No, you don't do it that way. Right. You think to what you're going to have to do to be lightweight, efficient, and if it's that way, it's going to be easy to build. There's going to be less parts in it.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
So what type of materials did you use? Traditional fiberglass material? I mean, that was a big machine that had to move that stuff around. So, to move the big gorilla head around.
Just a minute. There's several companies that have built very large, heavy animals of that big that some didn't work and some never got redesigned. I'm not going to say anything further than that, but
we know what you're talking about.
But what I was trying to explain to you is, yes, the head's got a lot of detail in it, but the whole body we're going to have 660 pounds of fur that's going to be sitting over some body shells like shoulders and belly and all that kind of stuff. Stop and think how much of the gorilla you don't see and you don't have to build.
Right.
You only build the parts you need, and you only need just enough primary structure that the secondary structure supports mostly the weight of 660 pounds of custom-made gorilla fur.
Wow.
Then when there's pictures on the internet, and then people have seen this. I have the scale model of it, an inch to the foot scale model. People look and they say, "Is that all there was to it?" Yes, that's all there was. Yeah.
Wow.
You don't let the size scare you. You pay attention. What would be the most efficient and simplest way to do that? And then all the individual parts that I had to draw up when we get built. We installed the main structure of that gorilla in one morning at Universal.
What?
We design it, we pre-fit everything in the shop. We're not going to stand around hacking and fitting with something that don't fit. No,
Wow.
you make it so it fits to begin with.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So why did you call the company Sequoia? And who'd you work with there?
I was working with some people that were ex-Disney, people from Disney. They go off and form their own companies. Some of them die and some of them live. But they had sort of evolved into a company doing, various kinds of animations, restaurant shows, all that kind of stuff. And it went bankrupt, of course. And then they wanted to reform the company. And then we had about an hour to call the Sacramento and said, we need a name. And every name I gave them, phoned them up, so during the day, none of the names would work. We wanted creative, this creative, that creative. And finally I says, Sequoia trees are pretty big. They're like gorillas. Yeah, okay, how about Sequoia? and the guy from Sacramento called me back and he said, okay, sir, you got it.
Wow.
Just simple. Awesome. It was a necessity.
Wow. So tell us about the pirate show with Steve Wynn at the Treasure Island. That was
okay. I was doing quite a bit of work in the Las Vegas area, and I had heard a rumor on the street about Steve Wynn has gone off his rocker. He wants to build a Treasure Island hotel, and he wants the pirate battle show. And he had a model of it in the Mirage. A cute little model, little glass case. Yeah. And I kept thinking, oh, what poor sap's going to get that one? It's all the things you never want to do. Always put a show that's radical. You put it behind the building, behind a curtain. When it doesn't work, it's okay.
Right.
He's putting it on between the building and the sidewalk.
Yep.
Where it's got to work.
Yep.
Even if it's not working, it's got to look like it's working.
Yep.
Okay. And you never want to use, are you drinking beer? Look at.
No, this is iced tea. Starbucks.
It looks like some Tecate to me. Anyway, no, you never want to do anything with water because you're going to have rust problems, all this big expenses. You're going to have water treatment, and you never want to have electrical cables on a moving vehicle. That ship moves 180 feet on 2 different radius turns, festooning cables full of electricity, and you never want to have propane with fire that can explode. There's all this list of why you never do a show like that. But there was about 22 vendors on that job. We looked at everything that would give us a big problem and designed it in such that we designed the problems away from it.
Wow.
And the job, because it was done that kind of diligence, it worked extremely well, lasted for a very, very long time.
Yeah. I
did the whole thing on a little old black and white Macintosh, wireframe design. Then I did all the production drawings because at first we have 3 phases. First phase, can you do it? Second phase, what's it going to get a vendor to build it? And the winning vendor gets it. Then the guy says, Gurr, can you do the production drawings? You know the most about it. And I says, oh my God, I worked my way to a chief engineer, president of a company. You want me to be a draftsman? Yes, sir, I want you to be a draftsman. So I drew all the production drawings for 2 ships because it was fun to do.
Yeah.
I go up to the shop every 2 weeks in Las Vegas and watch the shop, talk to the shop, make sure there's nothing I design is going to give anybody a fit. Wow. Simple as that.
Yeah. How did the ship sink? Did it go down or did it fall over? I forgot it.
No, it tipped over. If you got a deck, you hinge. It went down like that.
Oh.
One big steel tube with a rack on it that pivots, two big bearings, and a little 8-inch hydraulic cylinder. You actually push it down.
Oh.
Underneath it, we have what we call flotation billets that the machine always wants to stay up.
Oh.
We push it down.
Okay.
If the hydraulic line broke, oh, it will float back up to a stationary, good-looking show position.
Right.
You gotta think ahead of this stuff that it's going to stop. Some night it won't work, but it's got to look good while it's not working.
Yeah.
And you can't, because you can't hide it.
Right.
And Steve Wynn was there. I got along with him really. He's a real direct type of guy. But he looked at me one day and he says, "Gurr, it's going to work 100% perfect every day." And I said, "Yes, sir." It almost did. Yeah.
Wow. So 19.
Tom, I just love what you said about, having fun doing it. It seems like that's another thread through your career. It seems like you were always having a good time.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're completely correct because as you can tell from my timeline, we've gone through it this far. I started out to do one thing. It was a formal dream. And then I got there and in 2 weeks, the dream wasn't there. And then I goofed off for a year and a half. And I get a phone call out of the blue to a company I'd never thought I'd ever work for. And then I spent time with a guy like Walt Disney for 12 years. Yeah. And then I get fired from that. And then I take off and I go do stuff because I like to design stuff that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And the world is full of entrepreneurs. They have a big problem. They can quote some words and a guy will write it on a piece of paper. You get some artists can draw pictures of it, the eye candy. Well, what you gonna do when you're gonna cut expensive metal that's gonna move and carry people? Yeah. Now you're deadly serious. That's the part I love to do.
Wow.
I just like it.
Yeah. So in 1999, you were awarded the Thea Lifetime Achievement Award. Congratulations. And then you became an official Disney legend in 2001. And then it seems like things changed for you. Suddenly, you became a superstar and you had fans and you have a new documentary, you have a book, you do bus tours, you have T-shirts. Tell us about this new stardom.
And my best award in life?
Yeah.
I'm a Funko Pop now because
yes, you're a Funko Pop.
I thought I'm a vinyl toy in America. I think I've arrived finally. No, backing up to the early 80s, all the fan clubs started up. And of course, fan clubs, they know more about things and then they want to know ever more. It never ends. Whatever you've taught them and everything they've read, they want to know more. Oh. And then as time goes on, there's less and less people that were there to begin with.
Right.
And it turns out, I think Exitentia was the last of the original bunch. And he passed away and he left me the last man standing in this category. People are originally hired by Walt, way before the park opened.
Yeah.
I had no intentions to live to age of 94, which I'll be this year.
Right.
And so this thing just kind of blossomed around me. And the other thing was, I remember Walt used to say, if you're going to teach, be sure you entertain when you teach. That's why Disney cartoons were so good about stuff. And then I traveled on ships a lot, and I watched how entertainers work, and they work a crowd. And it was, none of my bailiwick of endeavors, but I saw how you could talk to people and give them very pedantic answers in great detail because they want to know, but I'm not putting them to sleep. And it turned out that sometimes I look and I said, "Gurr, what do I do these days?" Well, I'm going to go to an event tonight. What do you do? I'm going to stand on the stage. I'm going to have a wireless mic, and I'm going to walk around, and I'm going to be a stand-up comedian historian. So there's another career right there. That's what I do, and I like talking to people. Yeah. We have a lot of fun stuff. Everything's got to be fun stuff, as you can tell.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Tell us about the documentary. Has this been going on for a long time? And
No, here's the curious thing. If I've had people over the years come to me and says, Bob, we want to make a movie. No, well, look, go to the internet. There's hours and hours of stuff on the YouTube. You want to know what I do? There it is. I don't have time to do any of this stuff.
yeah.
And one guy, he was pretty insistent. And then I kept saying no. And then my manager, Ernie, brought him to my house with another producer. And they started talking, man. I said, well, I'll listen, but I'm not interested.
Yeah.
But I agreed that, okay, why don't you do this? If you want to talk about this thing again, write out your synopsis for a movie on one sheet of paper.
Ooh.
Usually you hand a guy a script,
Right.
a script. I said, one sheet of paper. And he said, we'll do it. And maybe about a month later, we have a lunch engagement. And I see the sheet of paper. He did it.
Wow.
And then I said, okay, you got 90 seconds. And he literally verbally gave me a pitch reel in 90 seconds.
Wow.
And it had some very unique takes on how you look at somebody's life.
Oh.
And I thought, oh, I'll take a chance. So then I agreed. I says, okay, I don't want to interfere. I don't want any part of the deal. You just give me the date, the location, the call time, and the costume, and I'll be there. And that's what I did.
Oh, awesome.
Oddly enough, I never saw the movie until the opening night.
Oh, wow.
I sat in the middle of the audience, so I'm further back from the screen and everything.
Right.
So that was my first inkling of what was it? What's a finished movie look like? It's about a 100-minute movie, full length.
Yeah.
And then, oddly enough, I saw some things that were not good.
Oh.
And I talked to the director. He turned out he's a very good guy, and Frank Woodward. And so he came over to my house and he says, "Okay, we got a streaming set up, and I'll play it on my Big Mac, and let's go over a couple of things." And the things that I wanted to go over was the same things he wanted to go over. And then I said, well, there's about 1 minute here that's not helping, so that you can take that one out. And your big American V8 car sound sucks. And I said, I'll go in there and I will find a car that's exactly what I'm talking about. And I found a Oldsmobile 442 that had the right sound. And so he went and put that in there, modified it. And so that's the only two things I ever did, was just something that just needed a little bitty fix.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny to look at a movie and say, oh my God, that's my whole life. It just went by, and it goes back into stuff that goes way back. I mean, look, I'm a stupid little kid stand on my head and I fall on the sidewalk with my father taking a picture.
Wow.
But it was kind of cute to see. Yeah, I'm 2 years old. I'm on my first wheels. I got a tricycle.
Yeah.
And then and everything just kept going from there. Cars, airplanes, goats, whatever, paper routes, Disney stuff, Universal stuff. And now, in my senior busy years, I'm a stand-up comic.
Yeah, I love that. So, Bob, how do you want to be remembered?
Well, that's really easy. It's up to everybody else to assign how I should be remembered. I have no opinion.
Wow. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Your audience will make your history. You step back out of that.
Yeah. Good philosophy. So at the end of all of our flights, Joe and I always ask this eternal burning question that we have. Joe, take it away.
Bob, what makes an experience timely yet timeless? And I think we've already touched on it a little bit, but
yeah, of everything you've seen out there in the world and everything you've done, what do you think makes it last and touch your heart?
Well, oddly enough, my reading in the last 10 years is the search for the origins of civilization. And I mean, going back about 22,000 years and working my way up to where we're at now in a lot of detail with certain specific parts of history, certain civilizations, certain how the wave of things change over a long period of time. The Rand McNally History Map of History is a good guide to tell you where to take a look. And then when you take a look, you look at, the Romans and Greeks, you look at the different religions. I also have big charts on the origin of religion. I'm very curious about a simple thing of with all of the different kinds of Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, the line of, it's controversial to say where we came from, but when it got to the line labeled Homo sapien, which means smart, I'm not sure completely, all of them are smart, but the difference in this creature from a Neanderthal is a reactionary, he's very good in the reactionary environment. The sapien has imagination, and that's both good and bad. And so from that point forward, I have a very, very good picture of watching all these paths. So I'm one guy today that can look at the news and not sit there and go, oh, I just don't understand. I'm the guy that got in the movie 22,000 years ago, and I'm watching this progression. I'm going to look at a little tiny part of it. Of course, my 94 years.
Yeah.
My life, relative to the age of the United States, I've lived about 34% of the life of the United States. Stop and think of that.
Wow. Yeah, you're right.
That's why I'm interested in the time frames. They're just fascinating.
Yeah.
It comes to an end someday, but I'll be totally satisfied. Boy, I just saw a really good movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was in it.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you the question, what's the key to your longevity?
Yeah.
And I think you answered it for me. I think it's curiosity. This curiosity keeps you.
Well, okay, well, it's a number of things because let's say by the time I reached about 50, I was pretty ornery and irascible and opinionated, as you guys have already found out. You find out there's a very important thing about physiology of humans. We are mammals. We still are mammals. We are always faced with we're going to fight or flee. It used to be lions and tigers and elephants and bears and everything. Today, it's nasty people and a bad manager and a lousy boss. Those are the animals that attack you all the time. Stop to something, think a minute. Mr. Buddha, the guy that walked around, 3,500 years ago, came back with an idea, and he said something like, humans should be entitled to a happy day, but we know they're never going to get it because of the environment that people are in. This leaves you with a choice. What do you do 4 or 5 times a day when something really adverse upsets you quite badly? You have to make a decision. Do I react in anger and frustration, or do I do a response to correct or get away from my unfortunate unhappiness of something? You learn to do that in seconds over time. It's going to happen to you every single day. It's sort of like Buddha thinking, something like that, without being a Buddhist, of course.
Yeah.
And I learned that a long time ago. I also learned about the Myers-Briggs theory of personality typing. I found that to be a secret weapon, because if I have a crazy idea and I say, my intuition, my gut reaction tells me we should do this. If I talk to a sensing type person in those 16 type of people, the guy will back and no, I'm not buying your idea. But what if I understand who he is and how he likes to understand or can understand? I can shift my pitch to him in a manner that a sensing person will get that he would never accept from an intuitive person.
Right.
So you combine a bunch of those, and then the reality is, once your body is calmed down from the you get all riled up, and then your blood starts to flow and your anger goes and everything. Those cycles will slow down. You won't have hardly any in a course of a day or a month or a week or whatever. Guess what? Your body now is chemically calmed down, and your immunization. What? I'm using the wrong word here. I'm losing the word for your capacity of your body to ward off diseases. Let's say. It's,
right.
I just technical word there.
Right.
Okay. That means your body becomes stronger, and it can ward off the bugs that everybody's going to come their way. And then your body's so strong, I don't get colds anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And I learn every morning. I get up and, it's like, oh, I do this. Oh my God, the blood's flowing. Oh, do you know what I could do today? I have this enthusiasm of, oh, there's have to do's and want to do. Well, I'll do a bunch of the have to do's, like talk to you guys, and then I could do my want to do's, the rest of the day. You get used to doing that.
Yeah.
And after a while, you begin to kind of understand it. But of course, you got to have the good DNA first.
Yes.
You have to understand the use of food. Food's only do two things. You're going to rebuild yourself by the bazillion cells a night. What building materials will you eat to do that?
Right.
Second one, you need energy to run, fuel.
Right.
That's mostly carbohydrates. Okay, their trick is understand what your body wants for energy and rebuilding itself all the time, and think of those materials, and then all you got to do is learn to like what you have to eat.
Yeah.
It's at least 90 days to get used to cauliflower, things like that. but I've done it. Yeah. I do my own cooking.
Wow.
Pressure cooker. And then, yeah.
Well, your body is a machine.
It's a bunch of little stuff. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
It's on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for your time. We're going to do a Q&A, if that's okay with you, for a few minutes.
Oh, certainly. Of course. Okay. It's what I do all day anyway.
I know. You can do some more stand-up comedy, but you are amazing. We are huge fans. What a body of work. What a life you have and continue to have. We hope you have many more years ahead of you. And it's just been a pleasure to be able to have you on our time machine.
Congratulations.
Oh, good. Okay.
So stick around. Don't go anywhere.
Stick around.
All right, Joe, why don't we go back to Disneyland and see some of Bob's other attractions.
So much more to experience there. Let's go. I'm on my way. Let's do it.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
We hoped you guys enjoyed the flight today. Thank you so much to our friend Bob Gurr for time traveling with us today. And if you have questions for Bob, stick around for our live Q&A. We won't have a lot of time, so we'll get through what we can. On behalf of Zeitgeist Design and Production, we thank you for spending your time with us on the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. If you enjoyed the journey, please check out all 44 of our time travel adventures on our YouTube channel or under the Zoomcast section at zeitgeist-usa.com. And they're also available as podcasts wherever you listen. The time machine is scheduled for maintenance in July, so set your pocket watches now for late August, when our time machine passenger will be former Walt Disney Imagineering show writer, film editor, Disney historian, media producer, and voiceover actor, including Mickey Mouse, Les Perkins.
Get it.